Hi there, this video is part of a series of videos that has been produced for high school teachers and students to take you through the whole recording and mixing process. So if you haven't already seen the other videos, then please click the link below to take you to the playlist, and also there's a free PDF that you can download as part of this resource that gives you lots of information around about the whole recording process, what gear to buy, how to go about doing this in a high school environment, and also the mixing. So in the video we did just before this, we looked at balancing the tracks that we recorded, and you can also download these tracks for free. But now we're going to move on to the equalization. We've gone through and we've grouped all our tracks together. We now have our volume faders set, and we're going to now EQ things. Now, the purpose of EQ is to make tracks sound better. So adjust the relative levels of the bass, mid and treble frequencies to make it sound more pleasing. And it's also what's used to make the instruments blend together and mesh together. Without EQ, everything sounds a little bit blocky. It doesn't quite feel gelled together. So EQ is a way we've got to, thing we've got to do to help improve the sound of things. So if we have a look at the session here, if I look at first of all at the lead vocal. Now these vocals were recorded well. They were recorded with a nice microphone in a nice room using an SE reflection filter to reduce any reflections in the room, and so end up with a pretty good vocal sound.
Don't know if maybe I should hate you, and darling, I realize I never.
So I'm going to bring up my equalizer here. Now, the first thing I always want to do with EQs is to go ahead and get rid of any bass frequencies that shouldn't be present in the signal. So for all of the non-bass instruments, so it's anything except for kick drum and bass guitar, I'm actually going to cut out bass frequencies using a thing here called a high pass filter. And on the Logic I can see it there, and I click on the button and it goes like this. So the general purpose of an EQ is to go ahead and boost or cut frequencies. So anytime I move something above the line or below the line, that's either going to boost those frequencies or cut those frequencies. So let's give myself a bit of a narrower bandwidth here, and let's see what happens to this vocal if I boost frequencies at 500 Hertz.
Never could, but now it's time that I make it.
So it makes it sound a little bit nasal.
'Cause you know you never
If I take it out, it makes it sound a little bit thin or a little bit too eerie.
I don't wanna write you a love song, and it feels.
So by boosting the frequencies, we can go ahead and listen to all of the frequencies boosted and figure out which are our worst frequencies.
Feels like I've read you all wrong. Can't do this no more.
So when I boost down here, you can hear the leakage from her headphones coming through.
Don't wanna deal with you and your lies. Every time a part of me dies, get out of my mind.
So as we went through there, we could hear that some frequencies are much worse than others. Now this method I'm showing you here, a lot of mixing engineer professionals and educators will say, don't do this. Instead, you should be doing everything without a solo, and you should be listening to all the tracks, and you should be using your ears. Generally what they mean by that though is that to use your ears if you've got 10 years of experience doing this sort of stuff. But as I'm generally thinking we're dealing with students here who are relative beginners with this, I think we need to be a little bit careful with that attitude, and I think this is a good way to start off learning about EQing, and you can move on to some more advanced ways of EQing as you gather more experience. But there were definitely some frequencies in there that sounded worse than others. Now, I know that they'll talk about you turn anything up by 20 decibels as I have here, it's going to make anything sound bad. Yep, it did make everything sound bad, but some was definitely worse than others. So let's just look at those again.
And darling, I realize I never could. But now it's time that I make it about me, 'cause you.
So it's the first one there around about 320. So I'm going to go back to 320, and I'm going to pull that frequency down to the negative area.
No, you never would. I don't want to write you a love song, and it feels like.
Now there's one more in there as well. Let's bring back to that.
Can't do this no more. Don't want to deal with you and your lies. Every time a part of
So I found about there's a bit rough as well. So that's about 670 or so.
me dies. Get out of my mind.
Now it's going to reduce the amount I'm taking them off there. And if we also had the high pass filter.
But now it's time that I make it about me, 'cause you.
So what I did firstly was to boost the frequencies to make sure that they figure out where the bad parts are, and then I've reduced them. And this is sort of the first rule I want you to remember with equalization, is always look to cut frequencies instead of boosting. Now that might seem counterintuitive. You think if a track sounds muddy or too dark or doesn't have enough clarity, you might think the option would be to go and do that. Boost the higher frequencies to get more of the high frequency there. The problem with that though is it ends up making the track too loud loud often, and students I see often boost frequencies all over the place, which in the end is the same as just boosting the volume control. So if we more have an attitude of taking away frequencies to try and improve a sound, that creates more space for us within the mix that we can use to craft and mesh things together a bit later on. So I'm always going to look to cut frequencies before I ever consider boosting them. So this vocal now sounds like, firstly without the EQ, sounds like this.
Oh, if maybe I should hate you.
And with the EQ.
Oh, if maybe I should hate you. And darling,
without it. Can you hear the extra low frequency in there? Makes it sound a little bit darker and muddier, and with the EQ.
Make it about me, 'cause you know you never would.
So that's gone and cleaned up the track. Now the first thing you might want to realise that EQ is not necessarily about making each track sound as good as it possibly can. It's about making it probably sound cleaner and making it work well with other tracks. So for example, if I go to the guitars, if I go to say these first tracks here, to go to the first rhythm guitar part, just going to pan it down the middle for a moment so we can hear it a bit clearer. Now you think that's a pretty nice sound? Okay, well let's turn the analyzer on, and we can see we've got these low frequencies down here. So because this is not a bass instrument, I'm going to go and cut off those lower frequencies. And you might think, hold on, you've just made it sound worse, because without that, hear that fullness down at the bottom of the guitar? That sounds quite nice, but by cutting it off, I've made it sound worse. Think, hold on, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I know, slightly higher there. But the point is that there's lower frequencies. If there's all of the four of the guitars have got that lower frequency building up there, that will end up clashing with the bass guitar and the lower end of the drums. And it'll make the track sound really muddy and wishy-washy in the lower end of the mix that we don't want. So on these guitars, I am going to be doing this low cut here. And because I know both of the guitars were played by the same player in the same instrument, so take that out, I'm going to copy that EQ over. So on Logic and most programs, you can hold down the Option or the Alt key and click and drag. And so now those two guitars have got the same EQ on them. Let's have a quick check of the other guitar. Get rid of these lower frequencies too. These back-end vocals. Now instead of doing an EQ for each of the back-end vocals, I'm just going to put it on this group track. So, because remember we had two back-end vocals that are part of this folder. Because it's the same singer in the same environment, it makes it a lot easier to just use one EQ. Let's see where she starts singing. Here we go.
I don't want to write you a love song, and it feels like I've read you all wrong. Can't do this no more.
Take out some of the mid frequencies, a little bit nasal.
Don't wanna deal with you and your lies.
Makes it sound a bit eerie and breathier.
I don't want to write you a love song, and it feels like I've read.
Which brings us to our drums now, and I'm just going to go in here and just take out all of these other plugins that have already been inserted there because they're just all a little bit in my way. Okay, we'll listen to the kick drum first of all.
I don't want to write you.
Now we don't necessarily want to be doing this high pass filter because then it makes it sound really weak, but I might just do a little bit because it's quite of a boomy kick. Because I like that frequency there. Now you might think, hold on, but the kick drum should be about all the bass stuff. Yeah, that's true, but it's also about hearing that click of where the kick drum cuts through the mix is as a result of the frequencies up around here, and it makes it cut through the mix a little bit better. So the high frequencies are very important for a kick drum as well. So this is where I might boost the high frequencies, but I'm not going to perhaps be boosting those there because that makes the kick drum sound too muddy. Makes it sound a bit cleaner. How about the snare drum? Now the snare drum, because it's not a bass instrument, I am going to do a high pass in it. Just get rid of those lower mids as well that can try and make it sound a little bit messier. The toms I'm going to leave for now. Let's look at these overheads. Now this is on the group. I needed to put one EQ on the overheads. I'm going to do a high pass to get rid of the kick drum leakage, but I do need to be careful because sometimes the kick drum coming through that can be really effective, can be really good. But I'm just going to be a little bit careful there for now because we're primarily focusing on those frequencies up there, the cymbals, but I'm just going to do a tiny, tiny boost there. Okay, what about the bass guitar? That's fine. Sounds nice, it's a nice bass sound.
I don't wanna write you a love song.
Okay, so let's have a listen to what the effect of all this EQing is on all of these instruments.
I don't wanna write you a love song, and it feels like I've read you.
So that's
all
without
wrong.
the EQ.
Can't do this no more.
And with the EQ.
Don't wanna deal with you and your lies every time a part of me dies.
So it's very subtle, but hopefully you can hear that it sounds cleaner now. There's less of the low frequency build-up. Just try it one more time without the EQ.
I don't wanna write you a love song.
And with the EQ.
I don't wanna write you a love song, and it feels like I've read you all wrong.
So that's worked quite well. Just also notice I've got some compression that's been automatically applied in this session. I want to get rid of that. We don't want the compression. No compression for now. Okay. So this is what your job now is before you continue on, is to go ahead and have a go at EQing the instruments. Remember to always try and cut frequencies before boosting them, and to use those high pass filters on any instrument which shouldn't have lower frequencies. And even instruments like the guitars that do have a bunch of lower frequency there, go and cut it out a little bit, but don't be too extreme with it, but try and make it so that it's creating some space for this bass guitar to come through. Because those EQ on the guitars, just realised we didn't have the other guitars being bypassed with EQ before. Take the EQ off. The guitars are a lot muddier without the EQ. So it's much cleaner with those guitars with the EQ on them. Let's just, because we missed it before, let's just do one more comparison between the EQ on and off. So without the EQ, and with the EQ, it's a whole lot cleaner there, working really well. Okay, so before you carry on, have a go at doing this EQ on all of your tracks and see if you can get it to a stage where you're approaching the relative sound of our reference track that I referred to in a previous video.
I don't wanna write you.
Of course, that EQ has now had other stuff put on it which you want to get rid of.